Ladies and gentlemen, honourable guests, welcome everybody to the FAO Pavilion for this Regen10 Inception event, unlocking the potential of productive and regenerative food systems. There's a lot of competition for excitement and noise out there, especially because we're next to the children and youth tent, but having looked around the room today and seen the amount of people that have come for this event, I think we can make this compete for noise and excitement in the busy cult space that we have here. So we're here today to celebrate the inception of Regen10 as a new global collective endeavor that sets out to establish what it would take over this decade to enable 50% of the world's food to be produced in a way that delivers positive outcomes for people, nature, and climate, providing affordable, nutritious food for 10 billion people. I'm Melissa Pinfield. I'm a senior partner at Meridian Institute, and we are really honored and delighted to be serving as the global hub for Regen10. We'll be hearing today from leaders of farmer organizations, Indigenous Peoples organizations, business, civil society, and philanthropy on why a global collective endeavor is needed and how Regen10 can add value, strengthening and amplifying existing efforts. All of you here today are already making important contributions in this space to ensure that food systems are productive and regenerative, working for the benefit of people and planet. Global food systems are under unprecedented strain from what is now being termed the polycrises. We have COVID, conflict, cost of living crisis, and the climate impacts. And decades of unsustainable practices focused on producing cheap, plentiful food have unfortunately led to soil degradation, water pollution, loss of nutrients, pollinators, and biodiversity. And this threatens agricultural productivity and it threatens the livelihoods of farmers. Regenerative approaches have deep roots in Indigenous peoples' food and knowledge systems and the experiences of many food producers around the world. There's a growing body of data and evidence and growing interest from businesses, governments, finance, civil society, farmers, food producers all over the world and others in what it would mean to shift to regenerative practices. So that's why it's critical right now that we undertake a rapid, widespread, and deep learning process to better understand the outcomes of regenerative approaches in different local contexts. We still have data and evidence gaps, and we still lack a shared understanding of the principles of regenerative approaches. There are important foundations we can build upon: agroecological principles, land stewardship concepts, regenerative agricultural practices. So we really want to take where we're at and take this learning from what is already happening. Before I invite our speakers onto the stage, let me give you a very quick overview of the key elements of Regen10 and the opportunities for engagement in the coming period of time. So firstly, what will Regen10 focus on? The Frameworks Hub will develop, through a highly consultative approach, the metrics and understanding of the principles and the metrics that can be used to measure the climate, environmental, social, cultural outcomes of regenerative approaches in diverse contexts. A regenerative outcomes framework will help ensure that we have a holistic view and understanding of regenerative food systems. These outcomes will be tested in a landscapes hub, which aims to draw on existing initiatives to gather data and evidence on landscape level food and farming projects, and to learn how we can best integrate and scale regenerative approaches. And finally, the Global Hub will serve as a secretariat for Regen10 and ensure we have the right governance and process in place for a truly inclusive global collaborative platform. Through this deep engagement and learning from landscapes, we aim to identify how policy, business, finance, research, and technical support can best be directed towards productive and regenerative approaches and deliver positive outcomes for people, nature, and climate. Regen's 10 approach will be guided by science and the principles of farmer centricity and deep inclusion. It's so important that this is a collective endeavor. While we need to move forward with food systems transformation, it's urgent, but we also need to make sure that this is anchored in deep listening and understanding of the diverse perspectives. We need to build trust and have a better understanding of what it means for people on the ground, those who have deep knowledge of the challenges and the opportunities. So please do get involved. This is my core message, unfortunately, it's behind the chairs. You can find information on our website, and what I really want you, there'll be many takeaways. You'll listen and learn a lot from the speakers that we have today, but the one message that I have for you is please do click on the website, regen10.org, and register your interest. That will ensure that we can stay in touch with you in the coming weeks and months ahead, and really invite you into the Regen10 network and take part in this inclusive and consultative processes. So it's now my sincere pleasure to call to the stage our first set of speakers. I think we are missing one of our speakers, or has he arrived? No. So Juan Carlos Hintiach, who's the coordinator of International Economic Cooperation and Autonomous Indigenous Development, is just a little bit delayed, so we can bring him in a little bit later when he comes. If I could call to the stage Elizabeth Simadala, who is president of East Africa Farmers Federation and Africa board member of the World Farmers Organization. Per Hagenes, CEO of IKEA Foundation. And Liz Yee, executive vice president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Highly scripted, you can tell. Elizabeth, let me start with you, because Regen10, of course, is farmer-centric. Why is it important that Regen10 embeds this idea of farmer in its work?
Yeah, thank you very much, Melissa, for giving me this opportunity. She forgot to mention that I'm a farmer. And I think that's very important. Yeah, so in the first case, it is important that Regen10 takes consideration of issues of farmers. Farmers have to be at the center. And one of the reasons why we feel that it should be farmer-centric is that when you look at most of the programs at PRAY, they pray lip service, most of the programs in our different countries. On the surface, they look as if they are giving farmers priority. But what happens in reality? It's a different story. Actually, when you look at most of these programs, they're white elephants. In my country, Uganda, where I come from, because they are not informed by the views, by the ideas from the farmers. And so, getting back to Regen10, it is very important that you give priority to farmers, that farmers inform all the different steps that are taken in Regen10. You just mentioned about the different hubs that are going to be created. Farmers need to be part and parcel of the decisions in every hub. Because when you look at the framework hub, the landscape hub, the global hub, they all encompass ideas of the farmers. And they are all looking at, creating regenerative agriculture, of which the target audience is a farmer. So when we do that, we hope that is when we can have sustainable production. And why? Why are we worried? Why do we have worries? It's because, like I mentioned, when programs start, everyone is targeting the farmer. But at the end, this doesn't happen. And what happens when this doesn't happen It means it creates donor fatigue. Most of the development partners would not want to support initiatives that are farmer-centered. And the reason is because they have put in a lot of investments, but these investments are irrelevant. They are not creating any impact in the lives of a farmer. I think you've seen in most African countries initiatives like markets where they are constructed on the roadside, but the vendors still continue to sell their things on the road and not going into those markets. You've seen abattoirs where they are constructed in a region that is livestock, that is where farmers are livestock farmers, but without being informed by the recommendations of the farmers, and at the end, those abattoirs cannot work because possibly farmers are keeping that livestock for cultural reasons. So I believe once we do that, once we are able to listen to farmers, then we will be able to create a new trend. Regen10 will be a game changer because then partners will believe in us. Currently, we are seeing few bilaterals between partners and, for example, farmers' organizations because they've lost trust due to those, such kind of. But once they build, then we will have an ecosystem that will bring everyone on, and there will be effective utilization of resources because everyone will be bringing their competence on the table. Thank you.
Elizabeth, always inspiring when I listen to you. If I can just ask one quick follow-up, and I know this is a massive question, and so if you can just sum it up in, for you, a few key words. From what you're seeing on the ground with the farmers and the networks that you're working with, what are the real challenges in this transition to regenerative food systems, and then what are they saying are the real opportunities? What are they excited about? So what are they concerned about, and what are they excited about?
Yeah, so what I see from the field, of course, where our business happens, is that most of the practices that we do are not documented because, one, we don't have enough capacity to document them, and we also don't have the resources. So there is no directory, or there is no one-stop point where you can go and find the regenerative activities that happen on the farm. So I believe this challenge, of course, can be addressed by making sure that as farmers and farmers organizations, we are capacitated to make sure that we develop like a compendium of all those practices, regenerative practices that happen on the farm. The worry that most partners have is because they look at them as unscalable, because they are not profiled, so they don't know that they can be put at scale. They look at them as if they are not innovative, because there is nothing that can prove that this can attract investment. So most partners are not ready to invest in them. So if the farmers are capacitated, then it means we will be able to prioritize those regenerative practices. We will be able to bring in the science that is required, to bring in the research that is required, so that we can put those practices, transform those practices into mechanisms to address the current challenges, which require, of course, science, to address the challenges of climate change. So what I see as opportunities, maybe finally, is that if this Regen10 concept is conceptualized, is supported by all the partners, then it means it's going to garner a lot of support from everyone. It's going to create that kind of ecosystem that is going to be a game changer, and we will see a number of opportunities across the entire value chain. For example, I see a number of opportunities coming in line of soil carbon, a number of opportunities in new markets, in new investments, in, of course, restoring organic landscapes, in, economic services ecosystems, but also in terms of massive production. And once we do this, then it means we are addressing issues of food security, we are addressing issues of nutrition, we are having a health population and a health planet. I thank you.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. I think it's really important for Regen10 that we started with the voice of farmers. So thank you for bringing that. I love that I've got the fly in my face. People are saying it's keeping us real. It's reminding us about the connection with nature. And I really hope that Juan Carlos can join us shortly. We had an amazing event here yesterday, FAO, where we were learning and listening from Indigenous peoples' practices around the world. It's deeply rooted in Indigenous culture, this concept of regenerative. And so we really wanted to also start with deep listening and learning from that experience as well. And we're having a lot of meetings, really helpful meetings with people to listen and learn. So come up to us if you've got stories to share, perspectives to share as well. So starting with that, I'm now turning to Per and Liz, and we're really deeply honored that IKEA Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation are announcing today their support for Regen10. This was initiated last year at COP26, really as a challenge about how can we put in place a farmer-centered, deeply inclusive collaborative process to answer this central question. And your two foundations have stepped up to the mark and said, we're in, we want to do this. So I'd really like to hear from both of you, really, the same question. You know, you've both been active in this space for a while. So why Regen10, why now?
Thank you. And first of all, I'd like to say I'm so glad that food is so prominent on the agenda in COP, because this hadn't been the case before. And I'm very glad to see that this room is so packed. I'm going to try to get something across in a whole cacophony of noise here, and I hope you can hear some of what I'm saying. I promise to be short. First of all, it took me some time to really understand that soil is very similar to the human body. So the human body needs constant re-energizing. It needs sleep, it needs food, it needs nutrients, it needs all kinds of input in order to function the way it should function. And that's exactly the same thing with the soil. If we don't make sure that the soil can keep the nutrients, we won't have nutrient food, we won't have an ability to actually drive agriculture in the way we need to do it in the future. So for me, it's taking care of the soil the way we take care of our body. And if we think about it that way, we're going to be successful. So as you said, Melissa, both Rockefeller and IKEA Foundation have been actively engaged with farmers in many countries around the world to look at how we can possibly both increase the livelihood of people living in those areas and at the same time do that within the planetary boundaries. Look for ways to do it that actually protects the planet. So we think it's possible to actually not only increase the yield so that farmers can invest the increased income in their children's health and education, which is basically what we focus on as a foundation, but also make sure that we keep the quality of the soil so the nutrients will not stay in the soil, but nutrients go into the products that we all need to eat in order to live healthily. So we've done that for quite some time, and we're very excited about the Regen10 because what we need to do is bring people together to get this to the next level. You know, shifting practices takes a long time. It's not done overnight, but we don't have a lot of time to lose. So we agreed with Rockefeller to engage and then try to push it forward as quickly as possible. Now, having said that, I'm also very concerned because shifting practices with farmers can be a very risky thing to do. And a lot of the farmers we work with are farmers who live from harvest to harvest. And if the harvest fails, that's going to have a huge impact on their lives. So I feel it's huge responsibility on our shoulders to make sure we do this in a very responsible way and work very closely with farmers, like Elizabeth has said, so that we know that we are doing the right thing and we're not doing any harm. So what we need to do, and what we, I think, try to do with Regen10 is to start to build an alliance. And in order to build a successful alliance, we have to have alliance partners. And we need to have partners from all aspects, all the people, all the organizations, the governments, the farmers, agrochemical companies that are engaged in providing a more effective agriculture within the planetary boundaries. So that alliance is really important. And I hope that the alliance can spend a reasonable amount of time to agree on how we define regenerative agriculture, so we can actually get on to do the work and not spend years and years arguing what it is and what it is not. Let's just get it done. Let's be aligned. And to be aligned and to create that platform, we need everyone involved. But we need to work fast, because we don't have a lot of time to lose. So for me, this is really an opportunity to thank you for being here, for being part of this venture. Liz and I are very happy to provide the money, but we are not going to do the work. We just got to put in the money and hope that the partners will actually take this to a level where we can not only have a successful and sustainable agriculture in the future, but we can also make sure that we have a planet that's livable for the next generations. So thank you.
Thanks, Per. Brilliant. Same question to you. Why Regen10? Why now?
Well, this is so amazing. I think from our perspective, the foundation has been involved in food systems for as long as I can remember. And to see finally having food recognized at COP as a critical climate challenge and opportunity is such an energizing thing. And plus, thank you for all being here. And Per, I just wanted to say, you know, on a personal level, I am trying to do the work. I have a little garden of my own, and I'm trying to create my own compost, despite having food as my, background. Just really learning how this can work in practice and work with all of you. And for our foundation, our mission is to make opportunity universal, and we do that in many different ways. Food is a critical part, because we wouldn't all be here if we didn't have something to eat to sustain ourselves and our planet. And so I just wanted to touch on the people side for just a minute. I mean, I was surprised when we started in this journey. Just 2.5 billion people rely on agriculture for their livelihoods. That's 30% of the planet, and in sub-Saharan Africa, that's 60%. So getting it right is not just about our nutrition, it's about livelihoods too, and making sure that all of our people have good food to eat. And the promise that I see from Regen10 is an opportunity for us to learn from each other, from indigenous practices, to make sure that we're listening to people across the field, from farmers, from other people who are very involved in this, as well as practice, as you said, Paul, that we need to engage in it. And I saw this firsthand. We're working with an organization called Urban Farms Co. in India, in partnership with the Nandi Foundation, and I had a chance to both see the work on the ground. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So that we're actually having a chance to work with entrepreneurial farmers who are looking to transition their 100-hectare farms across India to regenerative practices. And what the farmers told me is that not only are they seeing the value of regenerative practices in the food that they are creating, but in their families, in their children, in the communities, the decrease in non-communicable diseases that are happening as a result of the regenerative practices. And we're looking to tie that with the financing that the farmers are telling us that they need in order to scale their businesses, and connect that to the hundreds of millions of people who rely on this food system through India's local governments. So I think that is the way that we can learn from our farmers, generate better food that kids also like to eat, and make sure that we're improving health for our people and our planet. So thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We're really excited to be on this journey with all of you.
Is this one working? It is. Juan Carlos. And this is COP at its best. Absolutely COP at its best. Is this still on? Yes, wonderful. The question now to you, Juan Carlos, and thank you so much for joining us. We know that regenerative is so deeply rooted in Indigenous peoples' food and knowledge systems and cultures. Can you tell us a little bit about, what can we learn from some of these Indigenous peoples' practices? And also, how could a global inclusive initiative that sets out to be inclusive, deeply inclusive, and listening and learning, how do you think we can sort of best be set up to really engage with Indigenous peoples' organizations to be part of this collective endeavor?
Thank you very much. My name is Juan Carlos Gintiach. I'm from Rainforest of Ecuador, Shuar Indigenous, a member of COICA, Amazon Basin. And also member of the Global Alliance. What the Global Alliance is an indigenous organization, global network, that we work with indigenous organizations, what we have territories and forests. So we are part of this network is COICA. It's an indigenous organization from Mesoamerican and Caribbean, indigenous organizations from local communities from Congo Basin, and also Aman from Indonesia, and all Brazil, Apibi and Coyabe. So concerning your question, we indigenous people, first of all, we are concentrated to protect our territory. Without our territory, it's a matter of life and death, because we need to secure our land. And because why we need to secure that? Because we are connected, we are part of the land, and then for many centuries we are using our knowledge, traditional knowledge, scientific knowledge that for many centuries we were there, living, monitoring, taking care, and protecting. As you know, scientific reports, they are saying that we are controlling the 80% of biodiversity. Where is that biodiversity? In the indigenous territory. The most pristine of the forests, the most pristine of the ecosystems are there. So we have our knowledge concept with our cultural concept, like chakra is in my own language and the other languages. What does that mean, chakra? How we are connected with the land? Because in our chakra we have medicine, we have food, we have. You cannot imagine what we can have there inside in this little territory for many centuries, and then we are translating this information for many, many years in the territorials, in the Amazon Basin and local communities. So in this context, I want to mention here that my people, my brothers in the territory, they are working and they have initiatives on the ground. What kind of initiatives that they are developing? So we are connecting what maybe for upside is economy, maybe for us it's indigenous economy or circular economy, but for us, indigenous economy is how we protect and how we regenerate and how we protect the water, the soil, and the plants, and everything. So many examples to bring on that. On these projects or these initiatives, my brothers and the cultures, I want to make the attention that they need to be connected with these new concepts that you are bringing there. So I've been having some dialogues with some partners, and this is very important because for us, not only because we are claiming and protesting, we have initiatives from the ground, we have proposals, and we are asking help to continue protecting our knowledge, to continue protecting our sovereign food that for many centuries that we are working there. So some simple examples I bring here with some examples from the ground, like the best chocolate that some of my brothers and sisters they are producing, so how to are protecting as a sustainable economy. So that is one of the examples that I can share here. So my point here is that I would like to invite to the other partners that we need to see what organizations we who has territory, what organization who has self-determination and self-governance. This is something, the principles that we are also always presenting and that we need to articulate and thank you.
Juan Carlos, thank you so much. And thank you to all the speakers from this first part of the session. What I'm really taking away from listening to this is that, you know, Regen10 setting out to start with this really important phase of listening and learning, but also not take too long, you said. We need to get on, and we need to mobilize the resources and direct them in the right way to support the excellent work that's already happening on the ground. And so we need to get on, and we really want all of you to be part of this. So if you could put a round of applause, please, together for our first speakers. I'd really like to thank you. And thank you so much for the support. To our supporters, to all the work we do with farmer organizations, Indigenous Peoples organizations. We're so deeply grateful that you're taking the time to come and share your perspectives and offering feedback on Regen10 at this initial stage. I'm going to switch now to a panel. So if I could ask the speakers to please take your seats. And I'm going to introduce Morgan Gillespie, who is the Program Director of the Food and Land Use Coalition, and she's going to facilitate the panel.
Thank you, Melissa. What an exciting first panel, guys, and what a crowded room. I'm going to ask if you guys at the back could scooch over and scooch in. There's still some people trying to get in as we make this transition. We're going to move to our second panel now, and I'm going to ask the panelists to come up to the stage. So, Ariana Giuliadori, the Secretary General of the World Farmers Organization. Juan Lucas Restrepo, the Global Director of Partnerships and Advocacy at CGIAR and the Director General of the Alliance of Biodiversity International at the International Center for Tropical Agriculture at CIAT. If I can also ask Tony Shantosis to come up to the stage, please. Tony is the Director, Scaling Positive Agriculture at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Laureen, where are you? Laureen Akini Awar, the Chief of Staff and Head of Partnerships for Kenya National Farmers Federation, KNAF. And finally, Chris Buss. Chris, make your way to this stage. Chris is the Director of the Center of Economy and Finance at the International Union for Conservation and Nature, IUCN. Now, we do have limited time, so I'm going to dive straight into our exciting panelists. Ariana, we're going to start with you. Now, the World Farmers Organization aims to bring together national agricultural producer organizations as well as agricultural producer cooperative organizations to create policies, but also to advocate on world farmers' behalf. And you do this to improve the economic situation and livelihood of the farmers, their families, and also of the rural communities. Critical work. Now, the question is, how are you seeing the farmer's role in driving, in scaling, in implementing these practices that we know need to deliver against environment objectives, against social objectives, and also improving livelihoods? What are the farmers' hopes, but what are some of their concerns for these new regenerative approaches, or to scaling regenerative approaches for food production? Ariana, over to you.
Thank you, Morgan. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here today for this incredible event. It's been a long journey so far. And the whole point, and with this I'll quickly come to your question, the whole point of our conversation since when WFO has started initial conversations about Regen10 has always been to make sure that farmers were at the center, not only as targets or as those who have to drive change, but as those who have the solutions and then can share solutions with the other stakeholders and with the support so deep and so important of science can really drive change at the wider level. So what are the hopes of the farmers with Regen10? Is that first, that we start recognizing them for who they are. They are, for sure, the people in the food systems. They are the heart and souls of their families because they are family farmers. And they are the heart and soul of their communities because they keep the rural areas alive. But guys, they are first and foremost economic actors. And they have to earn out their living more than decently. And their hopes when it comes to switching to regenerative practices is as simple as that their effort is recognized. And the best hope for a farmer is that the market recognize the effort, is that we create the conducive environment for the farmer to sell its produce, her produce, to consumers that are able to recognize the value in it. So I am not a farmer myself. I have the honor to serve farmers like Elizabeth and to be serving them every day. There's no difference if you are a very small producer or if you are if you have a bigger farm. You all want the same, that your effort in the end of the day is recognized, that you can feed your family, you can send your children to school, you can see them thrive. And believe me, when it comes to nature, farmers consider it as the most important asset of their farm. It's not only the capital of their farm, it's also who they are. It represents their culture, their many times also their history of their family, and the future they want to pass over to the generations that will follow. So the farmers are the first ally when it comes to be more nature positive and approach regenerative practices. The concern is that this effort is not recognized, that data don't talk to what we do on the farm every day, because practices, as Elizabeth was reminding us in the previous panel, are not known because they are roots in history and science, new day science doesn't seize it. Or at the opposite side, that the new technologies that we do all need on the farm don't come to us because they are unaffordable or not accessible at all. So, biggest hope, work all together with the farmers at the heart to make change possible and to make food systems really regenerative. Food systems, not only agriculture, food systems. And biggest concern that I'm sure we're going to overcome is that these must be fully recognized and farmers must get a fair share of value for their effort.
Thank you so much, Ariana. You touched upon so many different elements. One, in terms of placing the farmers first, recognizing them as economic actors. But secondly, recognizing this lack of data, this lack of evidence, or different types of data not always being considered. And we know that regeneration or regenerative agriculture has been a contentious issue. The data, the evidence is skewed right now towards countries from the global north. It's hard to understand what practices we should be advocating for at scale to ensure we can deliver environmental objectives, improve yield, improve productivity, whilst also maintaining benefits to the farmers themselves. And this is one of the key tenets that Regen10 is aiming to unlock, really trying to understand what data gaps exist, how can we collect and solicit data at farm level, and how does that aggregate to landscape level, global level outcomes. So Juan Carlos, you're in the hot seat now. You have worked for many years at the Policy and Science Nexus, at CGIAR, at CIAT Biodiversity, at AgroSavia, and of course with the Colombian government. What do you think is needed to strengthen the evidence base and better understand regenerative outcomes in different contexts? Importantly, what are the trade-offs that we should be aware of when exploring the potential of regenerative approaches to really deliver triple wins? Wins for people, wins for nature, but also wins for climate.
Thank you, Morgan. Good morning to all. Great to be here in this FAO CGIAR and Rockefeller pavilion. I am wearing my CGIAR hat, but I'm going to change it for my Colombia hat to help provide some context from what you asked in your question. A person that has been a Vice Minister of Agriculture, leading research, national research organization, and then unfortunately not a farmer. I've been a very bad weekend farmer and learned that farming is knowledge intensive, and if we don't draw from that knowledge and connect that knowledge to new evidence, new science, new solutions, we're not gonna get there. So I wanted to start just as Juan Carlos did when he touched on the Ecuadorian chocolate. I think Colombian chocolate is quite good as well. Starting with a few examples, because we need solutions that are robust enough, tested enough, to then think about scaling up and out. Because we, as Per said, we don't want farmers taking huge risks. Those risks need to be de-risked through science and through really being able to prototype and test things before going on crazy ventures. A few examples. Through CIAT, we have modeled a large ranch, cattle farm in the Orinoco Basin in Colombia, where our model has proved that the meat coming out from that ranch is carbon positive because of management, because of a brachiaria that inhibits nitrification on the ground, so that means fewer greenhouse emissions, and a number of other things. And the carbon positive meat and the carbon market will help fund the farm, the business, and research over time. And at the smaller scale, we have these beautiful silvopastoral systems that are really, again, knowledge intensive, but very accessory and ready to be scaled out. There is a lot of restrictions to do that into a system that's more nature positive in the future. And one last example, just not to talk only about livestock, is that we, through AgroSavia, for many long years, we identified this tree from the natural forest that was almost lost because it's very fine wood. It's called abarco. And abarco is this tree that has very thin leaves that allows light to flow very smoothly into cacao trees. And we developed this agroforestry model with abarco and cacao. That's absolutely amazing and ready to be upscaled. What is needed from your question? The first thing, and we heard this from our Kenyan farmer, partnerships. And we're talking about partnerships. They need to be grounded to the territory. So it's territorial, multi-stakeholder innovation systems where we bring these solutions, where we test them, and where we get the public and the private buy-in from all of the inhabitants, communities, etc., to get there. It's, of course, the policy and the regulatory environment. If the environment, the policy environment is not favorable, it's almost impossible to move forward. And of course, the big problem is unlocking the funding, unlocking the finance for the transition, and that needs to be a mix of public, private, blended, etc. And there's no room to talk about that. My last point on the trade-offs, and this is where politics is also absolutely critical. And my last example again on livestock. Colombia has 35 million hectares of livestock production and only 7 million hectares in agriculture. And out of those 35, a lot of them are very unsustainable. That sector produces 15% of the greenhouse emissions of the whole country, only out of one sector. But now with the change of government, 200 years of Republican history, with center-right governments, now we have a government from the left, has given an opportunity where ranchers are ready to, through market approaches and agrarian reform, to take 3 million hectares out of that unsustainable production into agriculture and into the hands of landless farmers. And this is what the kind of scale that we need, and it requires, of course, the politics and the will, but that's what we need. We cannot have Democrats and Republicans, and every time there is a shift, then we lose another 4, 6, whatever years. In this case, we're seeing an opportunity where cattle ranchers that are mainly right-wing are sitting on the table and saying, okay, for our country to thrive, for our country to be more sustainable, for livelihoods to be addressed, these are the kinds of big games that we need to play, and that's where the trade-offs and the political elements and the technology and everything come back into place.
Thank you for that one, Carlos. Oh, Juan Lucas, apologies. Laureen, moving to you next. So we've kind of gone from the global now heading down to the national. So Laureen, your organization CNAF works with farmers on the front line of the climate crisis in Kenya. What are some of the challenges but also opportunities that you are seeing on the ground as farmers introduce regenerative approaches? How can an initiative, a global initiative such as Regen10, really support farmer-centric approaches to support knowledge, learning?
Thank you so much, Morgan. I would say that currently we are practicing, actually we have quite a number of programs that are focused towards regenerative agriculture, and probably by the end of this day we should really think about how we define regenerative agriculture. We have what is called the Kenya Farm Forestry and Afforestation Program, a very ambitious 10 years program that has quite a number of aspects. We have one called Implementing Silvopastoral Systems. We have what is called Planting Climate Resilience, just to mention a few. But of course, these kind of programs come with quite a number of challenges. And for me, the first thing we have to all acknowledge is that regenerative agriculture is a journey that a farmer takes. So the challenges will be personal, the challenges will be political, the challenges will be practical. And one of the key things is that it is a transition. It is, changing the systemic thinking of a farmer from what they are used to. That is a monoculture where inputs, fertilizer, seed, weed, go. So this kind of thing needs farmers to really understand what they're taking themselves into. And also, it will need capacities to be built so that farmers really understand, the whole transitional journey. So for me, one of the key challenges will be that. The second challenge is, do we have policies that support this? And if we have policies, do we have investments at all the levels to support this? But indeed, regenerative agriculture has opportunities. And for me, it is one of the key areas that we could see as a solution to having agriculture as a solution to climate change. Because a number of times, of course, when we are talking about climate change, the first thing we talk about is climate change. Agriculture is the number one culprit. Yeah? So that is an opportunity in itself. But then I want to say that to have this go forward, we have to set very specific goals. Even as we start this inception process, we have to take stock of what is already happening. Because we might say that it is a new, a new thing. But farmers are practicing it somewhere. So we have to take stock of it, so that then in the next 10 years, we come back and say, we started at this point, we have gone to this point, and we have succeeded. Yeah. And then the other thing that we have to talk about is we have to have a very solid traceability system. If we want to have this adopted, we have to be it has to be very key, so that those farmers get benefits from that, the whole system, because they are taking a journey, like I said. The other thing is that, of course, we have to have the government support. And it's not just support by coming and saying, we are going to support it. What are you putting into it? The other thing that I also want to say is that we have to be very innovative on communicating, because maybe we are not going to get to all the farmers. How do we make sure that we get this information to all the farmers? I don't know if you will introduce artificial intelligence or you have a digital kind of system, yeah? And make it as simple as possible. A very basic example is we have what is called a CNAF USSD platform. you can access information from it from anywhere. You don't have to have a very sophisticated phone to access that kind of information. But then, how do we make it very farmer-centric? For me, 5 things. It has to be collaborative, it has to be integrative, it has to be reflective, it has to be constructive, but it also has to be inclusive. And when we are talking about inclusivity, we cannot just say that, well, we have maybe a policy on regenerative 10 in our country, and down there we have explained the problems, and somewhere down there we've said cross-cutting issues, and we say gender. And then what? Yeah? If we are going to talk about inclusivity, we have to explain what this, how we are going to solve the gender issue. Because we cannot take regenerative agriculture away from gender. It's the women that practice agriculture. So you cannot say it's a cross-cutting issue and you don't give a solution to it. Yeah? And then when we say it has to be constructive, it has to be locally led. If we are going to have regenerative agriculture introduced, we are not going to tell farmers to do this. We are going to learn from the practices the farmers have and then take it forward. When we say it has to be reflective, it has to go through all the processes. The farmers have to understand why they're doing it. The farmers have to understand the benefits of it. The farmers have to understand the challenges of it. You know, so that then when they're doing it, they're proud of what they're doing, and you know, they're taking it up with them. And then it has to be integrative. I don't have to say that, but it has to be very collaborative. It has to have everyone on board. It's unfortunate that I don't know if there are politicians around, but as long as we are going to talk about it, and the people who are making policies are not here, it is not going to make any much difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laureen. And such really critical points being raised about inclusivity, about taking us through this process. And those are really the tenets that the Regen10 platforms is seeking to enable and deliver. But also recognizing you've heard so many different practices mentioned on stage today, and being agnostic about what we're calling it. Is it climate smart? Is it agroecological? Is it regenerative? But what we're really seeking to deliver is outcomes. Improve freshwater security, improve biodiversity, improve soil health, improve productivity. All of these things improve livelihoods for farmers, improved access for gender. And seeing what we can do to co-create a framework that will enable us to test hypotheses and then make decisions grounded in the best available science that works in the local context. We have 2 panelists left, Chris and Tony. Save the best for last. We are a little bit short on time, gentlemen. So Chris first, IUCN has a lot of experience working on the ground with diverse actors, including through the forest and farm facility. What are some of the lessons learned from your work that can inform our approach here with Regen10? And how can we make sure, as a result of our collective efforts, that resources are really getting channeled to where it's needed most?
Thanks. I'd actually prepared my notes to be last, which is always a good advantage. You can copy everyone else's, but it seems as though we swapped over. So I think I'll be very brief, because I just think there's two messages. And we've just heard it from Laureen, is hearing the voices. That's a great experience that we've had with working with local communities, indigenous peoples, smallholders and farmers, is hear the voice. And I've got a long list of things that we had on the farmers' ideas, the inclusivity. I love the definition of inclusivity and what that looks like, and what it looks like now and what it should actually look like, the trade-offs and locally led aspects. I think for an organisation like IUCN to be involved in agriculture, for us it's essential to see those cultural and social aspects included. Sorry, it's terrible. Is that one? It might be me, but yeah, it's seeing the social and cultural aspects included, and that's what we've really heard from the voices of working on the ground through organisations like the Forest and Farm Facility. And then the other message is you know, we've worked with organisations to build their capacity, not just sort of influence policy at international and national level, but also to access markets. but also to access finance. And one thing that's sort of dawning on that I've picked up from many discussions is there's such a small amount of climate finance that's really reaching the ground. 1 to 10% is getting to farmers and where it happens. And now when we try and do that, what we hear from is we have to have fiduciary duty for taxpayers' money. But we all know what we've just seen in the last 2 or 3 years of trillions of pounds being thrown out the door for COVID responses with very little fiduciary duty. So we can actually do it. And I think working but making sure we have those data, metrics, systems in place, farmer centricity to stimulate regenerative agriculture, so when those finances do flow, it's flowing for environmental, social and economic returns. And I think that just my final word is, and I think this is great being here, and I think, you know, the farmer's voice is being heard so much more now from COP26 to COP27. There's been a big transition for agriculture, and the role of nature and nature-based solutions and how we include that in there, and nature-based solutions being central to regenerative agriculture. So thank you very much. I hope that wasn't too long, and I'll hand over to Tony.
Thank you so much, Chris. Now, Tony does work for WBCSD, but interestingly, he is a farmer working on
a very tired one.
The face said it all. Yeah. But Tony, we know many WBCSD members are interested in scaling regenerative approaches. Some folks are even concerned about the interest from the members in scaling regenerative approaches. And a number of business platforms, including those housed at WBCSD, are developing various definitions, principles, and metrics. The OP2P platform is the main one. How can Regen10 then add value to this space? And what role do you see business playing here?
Thank you, and thanks for the question. Maybe just building on some of the things that we've initially heard. I just wanted to say how much I agree with many of the points, especially about farmers being economic actors. My wife and I are often up late at night, or we don't go to sleep at night because we're so worried about the economic environment on our organic dairy farm. We produce 300,000 litres of organic milk a year. We're organic. We're trying to transition to produce for carbon. We're trying to improve soil health. So we believe that this transition is possible, but we are quite scared about what that looks like. But we know that there is a huge land army of producers that can actually produce for climate, for nature, for some of the outcomes that we're talking about here. And if they can be leveraged in the way that Regen10 wants to leverage them, then we can actually try and move the needle on some of this a little bit more. Now, the work that I do at WBCSD is working so closely with businesses who want to move the needle in the same way. They are setting science-based targets around climate. They want to move to do the same for nature. They want to look at equitable livelihoods. They want to be able to measure that credibly. And if they're going to be able to measure that credibly in order to provide the incentives into the system that we know that they can bring, we know that this alignment of outcome frameworks is really, really important. And we've had some great progress on the development of some good regenerative agriculture outcome frameworks. And Regen10 can come and help join the dots between the great work of One Planet Business of Biodiversity, of the Sustainable Agriculture Innovation Platform, and others who are helping to do this. So we need that convergence, and that's what Regen10 can really help bring here to get to the scale that I was just mentioning. But we also need a clear roadmap for how that's going to happen, and it's through Regen10 that we can start joining the dots of what an outcome framework actually looks like if it gets adopted by all of the multiple stakeholders that we've been talking about today. And that roadmap has to happen over time. It has to be done together. We have to understand business, farmers, indigenous groups, public, civil society. It's an incredibly complex process, but we have to come together under Regen10 to make that happen. And so we think that that's where this rubber hits the road of saying that outcome framework can be applied into landscapes, can be tested, and we can show and prove that it's actually making a difference. But we've got some road ahead of us, and we really want more partners to come on board to join us. But from our perspective, we're doing everything we can to make sure that whatever the business sector has done already on the development of metrics can be brought to this thinking in respect of all of the principles of inclusion that we've been talking about before. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. A round of applause, please, for our excellent panel. Now, folks, you'll notice that we are at time, but we're going to go over just 2 or 3 minutes as we close this out today. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but we will be around. You can grab Melissa, myself, Ariana, Tony, Chris after this. And again, thank you so much to the panel. Melissa.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our speakers and to our panelists. Just want to spend just a couple of minutes reiterating some of the key takeaways here. So we've started to unpack a bit and hear different perspectives about those things that are the core principles and approach of Regen10: farmer centricity, deep inclusion, science-based approaches, evidence-based. What does this mean? What you've heard less about is kind of what comes next and what are we actually going to do. We're really conscious of that. So I really want to encourage everybody to go to the Regen10 website. And if I'm clever enough, I can go backwards. You can't really see it. It's there. We've actually got around the room, or just outside the room, we've got QR codes. Your Wi-Fi might not be working, but take a picture of it maybe. But scan that, it'll take you straight to the website. And you can fill in your details, because we'd really like to stay in touch with all of you who've shown enough interest in this busy COP to come here today to listen to this discussion. I'm assuming that means it's because you're interested in this work, and I'm really hoping it means that you want to be part of it. So please go in and register your interest. What particular elements of Regen10 you're interested? What would you like to contribute to this effort? So go there, register. It'll enable us to stay in touch with you. As we start to roll this out, we can keep in touch with you and bring you in and get those insights happening into the different consultations and processes that are unfolding now. The work really starts now. We've heard why it's important. I want to just thank our 2 founding supporters, IKEA Foundation and the Rocker Foundation, for your trust in us to start this process. And to the partners involved, we've heard from a number of them today. There are more that couldn't be here at COP27. So FOLU, IUCN, Leaders Quest, Meridian Institute, Systemic, WBCSD, World Farmers Organization are some of the initial partners of Regen10. I also really want to acknowledge the many, many people and organizations that were involved in the initial inception and conceptualization of Regen10. We have a number of them in the room. I can see Federico from Climate Champions, Steve Lang and others, people who really kind of conceived of this idea. Many others of you have already been contributing to Regen10 over the last year, helping shape our thinking. So come back in, come and join this effort, register your interest, and we really look forward to the work that we can do together on this important topic. Thanks so much, everybody.